Hey guys, welcome to our first Pacific Beach Presbyterian Shelter Youth Group podcast. You might be wondering what we're doing here on your screens. And Grant and I were talking, and we decided that given the way things are right now in San Diego, in the country, in the world, that it's safer for us to continue meeting online. But I'm going to level with you guys. During Zoom, I have noticed that it might be a little difficult for some of y'all to pay attention to the messages. And I get it. I know. I am not more exciting than whatever y'all are gaming on. So we're trying something new. Grant and I have decided that instead of doing the more standard live teaching lessons that we normally do for you folks, that we are going to try doing this podcast style. You can put on in the background, listen to whenever you want, go at your own pace. Put me at ×5 speed so you can get through it faster. Whatever you need to do. Whatever you need to do. And we're going to be doing these once a week. The idea is that we're going to take a question that we think might be interesting to you, definitely is interesting to us, and just talk it through and hope you guys can find some meaning in all of that. But in addition to this whole new lesson format, we are going to be doing youth group online over Zoom. But we're going to be doing it every other week instead, because I know doing Zoom calls every week can get a little tiring. I figure y'all are doing enough Zooming at school. And in the off weeks, you guys know this, I'll be hanging out in Discord. We can play video games, we can talk about whatever. But I'm going to cut out some time every Wednesday that we're not meeting to hang out with you guys. And now that you guys are acquainted with how youth group might look for the immediate foreseeable future, we want to talk about what it looks like to be a Christian in a pandemic and what the church's response to a pandemic, particularly this one, should be. And as you can see, Grant is with me. And we both have a lot to say on this. I think we both feel pretty passionately that some churches are doing a great job in this pandemic. Some churches are doing a not so great job in this pandemic. And we thought it was only fair that since we're making you guys skip out on in-person youth group for a little bit longer, that we explain some of the rationale and why we're doing this.
Yeah, absolutely. And if I can just add one more thing to, as we're experiencing these sort of new lessons together, and Tony and I trying this out for the first time.
Yep.
We're going to try to do this in the format of a conversation, right? And rather than just sort of talking at you, we'll be talking to each other about this topic and then in the future other things. And I know that if you have anything you'd like us to talk about, definitely tell Tony.
Yeah.
Any questions, any Bible passages, any topics, anything at all, really. Mm-hmm. Let us know, and we'll definitely try to get to it at some point or in some way.
Yeah. I know when I was in youth group, they asked us once what we wanted people to talk, what conversations, what topics we wanted to hear about. And I don't know who, but somebody put aliens in every single time they asked, and they never talked about aliens. So who knows? We'll have to rectify that in the future.
Maybe we'll do a podcast on aliens. It's possible. Not saying it won't happen. But yeah, I just wanted to get that out there. This is going to be conversational.
Yeah. So. Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, guys, feel free to throw this on in the background. This is not something you have to watch eyes glued. If you do, I will be honored and touched. But we're hoping that this is set up in a way where you kind of just put this on the background and just kind of absorb me and Grant's conversation as we go. But to kick things off, Grant, what do you think the church's response to the pandemic should be? What do you like? Do you have any observations, things you've noticed, things that you...
so much.
So much,
Tony.
Open the can of worms, Grant. Let it out.
Yeah. Well, there's... We're going to have to talk a lot about different things in this, right? There's so many different pieces to this. I think the thing that struck me the most early on, and it's continued through, but definitely early on, is like... so many churches feel like their freedom is being attacked when by not being asked to meet or being asked to meet online and not be able to meet in person. And I don't know. It just struck me that the idea that churches would not put the safety of their people first seems like a missed opportunity to love their neighbor.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm with you. At first, I mean, I don't know where y'all were at in March and what y'all's thought process were. But when this all went down, my first thought as someone who works in a church was like, sweet, I get like a week off. I get a few weeks off. But then I saw what you're talking about. A lot of people got like frustrated, like, no, like they can't tell us to stop meeting. Like, that's not fair. This is an attack on us.
Yeah.
And I think that is the wrong idea to have. I don't think anybody was trying to attack churches by telling people to keep things a little safer.
No, and I want to be a little bit. I want to give a little bit of credit to some of these churches because, I have friends who work at other churches, and one of them, I won't name the church he works at, but he was telling me that in the beginning they followed all the directions, right, and they shut everything down. And then as guidelines came out for churches to start being able to reopen, they abided by all the guidelines and they reopened certain things in person. But then when the second shutdown happened in the summer, when churches were told to shut back down again, that's when they decided to defy the governor's orders. And I disagree with them. I don't think they should have done that, personally. But the rationale was, listen, we followed all the instructions. We're doing things to keep people safe. And then the other piece of it, which is really important, is that for them at the time, and I haven't talked to them recently, so I don't know if it's still the case.
Sure.
But in the summertime, for them, they had lost more people to suicide than they had to COVID.
Wow.
And this is a big church, and mostly, a pretty young church. I mean, not, obviously, with a mega church, you're never going to have all young people, but
Sure.
but compared to something like PV Pres, the average age was much younger, so much healthier. But yeah, they had lost more people to suicide than to COVID, and so again, while I disagreed with opening up and staying open despite the government's orders, I did feel a little bit of like I want to give them a little bit of grace, a little bit. I'm struggling for the right word here, but I understand their point of view, right? Because the mental health side of this is something that also has to be taken into consideration.
Yeah, I mean, that's tough. That was really tough, and I think their argument is a sound one. I'm having trouble finding difficulty with it. I mean, if more people are losing their lives due to a mental health battle like suicide than they are to COVID, logically the thing would be, let's focus on the mental health of our church right now.
Oh.
But my thought would be, I'm curious what they tried to do to help maintain the mental health of their congregants while still remaining shut down.
Right. Well, see, that's the thing is they didn't stay shut down.
Right.
They started having in-person meetings again.
That's
and they started doing them indoors. And they had, I mean, again, some things that I disagreed with. Right. They started having services where you didn't have to wear a mask. I mean, I told my friend this, and I think that the idea that mental health and physical health, that in this pandemic we have to choose one or the other, is a false dichotomy, right? Yep. It's the idea that
you don't have to pick one.
Right. That in fact, mask wearing and social distancing, we could be having healthy church services. Now, there's a whole other host of factors there, right? But like the need to protect people's mental health doesn't mean we can't wear masks too. And I don't know. What do you think about mask wearing in general? What is the
wear your mask? Do it.
Well, right, but I totally get that. I'm totally with you.
I think that so maybe I'm wrong. I believe people don't really have as big of an issue with mask wearing as people have let on. I'm talking really hard, guys. But I think that the mask has almost come to like symbolize that you've given in to COVID, that you're following those dirty guidelines. And I don't know. I think really it's such a simple thing. It's easy. It's not hard. This is really random. For some of y'all that didn't know this about me, I used to be the cow at Chick-fil-A, and that's gonna loop back somewhere. Trust me.
You remember that?
And the suit is uncomfortable. It's hot. It's muggy. I've passed out in it once. But if I can wear that suit in a hot July day with a thick head on that you can barely breathe out of for hours at a time, like, this is easy. This is nothing. Yeah. Which, and speaking of, y'all might be watching this and you're like, Grant, Tony, y'all are such hypocrites, telling churches not to meet up right now, saying we can't have youth group right now. But there are ways to do stuff safely in person. There's still ways to get some human contact interaction. Grant and I both have high-risk families, so we have been taking a pretty severe quarantine, more intense than other people that I know have, more intense than I might even recommend other people. Yeah. But because of that, we both talked and decided that we can continue to meet like this because we're both remaining as safe as we can. We both functionally included each other in our pods, basically. It hasn't happened yet, but if I had to do something that I felt was like especially dangerous, I would double check with Grant and be like, hey, are you okay with me doing this? Or do you want to stop meeting if I do this?
Right.
Kind of thing.
Well, yeah, and we've had those conversations, right? I mean, we had, when I took my trip back in September, we didn't, when I got back, we didn't meet for a few weeks in person afterwards. When you got sick, right? It was just a little cold, thankfully.
Right. Yeah, it's just a cold, don't worry.
Not COVID. Neither one of us has had COVID. But when you came down with a little, and me too, right? Like a couple weeks earlier, I'd come down with a little thing, and we just didn't meet in person because, there's no point in risking it.
Yeah, and I mean, to jump back to the whole, to your friend's church, right, is I really do applaud them for taking the mental health of their congregants so seriously. Yeah. But there's so many things that you can do to, make your meetings safer, right? I applaud any church who stands as like, hey, we feel like we need to meet. We have prayed about it. We feel like the only way to ensure the safety of our congregants' mental health right now is continue meeting. We're going to do it open air. We're going to enforce masks, temperature checks, the whole 9 yards, and we're going to continue to provide adequate online services for those who don't feel comfortable coming. All of that.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like my, I don't want to say frustration, but frustration with a lot of folks right now is there are ways to do stuff right now, like we were doing in-person youth group for a long time before things got really bad. Yeah. And there are ways to do in-person church services, like this church was doing one once a month. Yeah. Safely. But it's almost like a willful ignorance to the guidelines or a willing opposition to the guidelines. Right. At times even.
Yeah. To take it back to the very beginning, the first question you asked me, some of that unwillingness or the sort of blindness to the guidelines and a complete ignoring of them, I feel like it stems from just a complete like the worldview through which these pastors and churches are like the lens that they're using, right? The way that they're looking at the world is through without getting overly political about it. It's like an American liberty and freedom lens, right? Sure. As opposed to like the lens or criteria or worldview of Jesus or of the Bible. Mm-hmm. And I think if we were, so there's this thing in philosophy and theology known as Pascal's wager. Oh. Are you familiar?
Yep.
Okay. If you're not, Pascal's wager is about it's a question for atheists, essentially, that, and this was a philosopher whose last name is Pascal, came up with this, and it's, if you were talking with an atheist, you'd say, listen, if you're right and I'm wrong, then the worst thing that happens to me is at the end of it all, there's nothing.
Sure.
And we both wind up in the same place. Right. But if I, a Christian, am right and you, the atheist, are wrong, then we get to the end of our lives and I'm in heaven and you're in hell. So the wager, right, is you might as well bet on being a Christian, because there's so much more to lose if you're wrong as an atheist than if you're wrong as a Christian.
Yeah.
And the reason I bring that up, the reason I even bring up Pascal's wager, is that I think some American Christians who are fighting mask wearing and meeting in person maybe need to ask themselves, people who I have another friend. Friend is maybe a strong word. That's another conversation.
Friend, if you're watching, I apologize.
This is a person I went to seminary with.
I see.
And he's a pastor at a church up a little ways up north. But he doesn't believe. He believes that that most of these things, lockdowns, the mask wearing, that they are the government trying to control us and take away our freedoms. And so for somebody like him, this is the why I bring up Pascal's wager. For somebody like him, it's like, okay, let's say that masks don't work, and that all of this is not about saving anybody's life.
Right.
If I'm wrong, all I did was wear the cow suit, and not even that bad. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, you're right.
All I did was put on a piece of cloth over my face for a little while. If he's wrong, then he could be killing people or wind up getting sick himself.
It's true.
Right? So there's a little bit of Pascal's wager involved, I think, in some of these things, where it's like the potential consequences are so much worse for ignoring it that I don't understand why people would continue to think, oh, there's no reason to do these things.
Even more than that, let's say in a hypothetical world, right, that like 10 months from now, a year from now, whatever, science comes out and they're like, hey, we found out masks actually didn't do anything. Oh, darn. I still think there's a lot of value in the statement masks make. I love your mask. If you guys haven't seen Grant's mask.
I mean, if you're watching this instead of just listening to it, I'll hold it up here.
Yeah. Grant's mask says, love thy neighbor. And I love that, because that really is what mask wearing is all about, is you saying, hey, I will breathe through a thin piece of fabric because I don't want you or I to get sick. I want this quarantine to end. I acknowledge this has been really tough on the mental health of a lot of people I know, so I'm going to wear a thin piece of fabric to help slow the spread and protect people around me. And the whole point of this, the original question, right, is like, what's a Christian's response to all of this? Whenever I come across like anything that like I'm really like struggling with, don't understand, need guidance on, I turn back to Jesus was asked once what the most important commandment was, and he said pretty clearly. As a matter of fact, the most important commandment is love God, and second to that, and second to only that is love your neighbor as yourself. Right, and so that is the lens that I try and look at everything through. Yeah. And when I look at COVID through that lens, it's pretty clear and obvious to me that we are called to protect other people. Whatever that looks like, the best information that we have right now says that looks like wearing a mask, staying 6 feet apart, knowing your body and knowing what symptoms you're feeling and staying away from you when you feel sick, and doing what you can to like help make this end. I mean, this sucks.
Well, and it goes even further than that, right? Because we've talked a lot so far just in the last few minutes about mental health, right? And so it is wearing a mask, and it is staying 6 feet apart, and it is being healthy and staying away from people, but it's also reaching out to people and making sure they're okay.
Yep.
It is doing certain safe things like, say, getting together with people outdoors 6 feet apart with masks on, so that people get human contact. And checking in with your friends who are struggling, because we also have the responsibility to mental health, which is why so many churches, I think, are doing things that I disagree with. But that struggle towards helping people with mental health is also super important. We can't forget that, even as we also definitely can't forget that there's a pandemic raging, and we can't just go, do whatever. But, I'll give an example. and this is going to make me sound like a hero, and I don't mean it that way, but like, my parents are, Tony mentioned that both of us are in super high risk households. Mm-hmm. I don't live with my parents, but they are my dad is incredibly high risk. So the two of them almost never, I mean, they leave the house to maybe go on walks outdoors every now and then.
Sure.
But other than that, they don't see anybody. They don't go to grocery stores, anything. Like, mm-hmm. It's, me and my brother do a lot of the picking up for them, things like that. So I'm careful about myself so that I can go sit on my parents' balcony. I'm still outside. I'm still more than 6 feet apart, sure. Whereas they're inside, but we're far away, but we can talk. Mm-hmm. And I can be the person who goes to visit them so that they have some kind of social interaction. Because if they didn't, the two of them, they would have no one to talk to. So it's things like that where the decision to keep ourselves safe
right.
allows us to then help other people's mental health as well as keep them physically healthy.
Yeah, similar example. I think I mentioned this before to some of you guys, but I'm really bummed out that I can count on one and a half hands how many people have held my son, my newborn son, right? And my grandparents, they live here. They were so excited for this newborn baby. They want nothing more than to hold this kid and be able to love him and do all this great stuff. And I would love to be able to provide them that because they're not going out anywhere. They are high risk themselves. Even if they wanted to go out places, they really couldn't. But because there are members of my family who are interacting with them who aren't being safe, I can't safely spend time with them. I can't let them hold my son, as tough as that is for them, because there are members of my family who are seeing them who aren't being safe. And it's if a few people in my family would just go out less, wear their masks more often, stop subscribing to so many conspiracy theories now, then the mental health of my grandparents could be significantly improved. They could see more of their family. And really, I think the most important thing is when everyone does what they can, when everyone puts into the system, it just gets easier on everybody.
Yeah.
But what happens is there are people who want to follow the guidelines and are following the guidelines who are forced to be more restricted because a large portion of society and people they know, I'm sure too, just don't care.
Yeah.
But that's the toughest thing to me. Well, I've said a lot. There are many tough things.
There are many tough things, but yes, one of them is definitely there's a sense of
apathy.
Yeah, a lot of people are just not taking it seriously, and because of that, those of us who do take it seriously, we wind up feeling like we're living even more restricted lives. There are things that I probably could do but choose not to because I think if I do that, I'll probably be around people who aren't taking it seriously. Mm-hmm. So again, there's something about choosing to take the virus seriously, take your own health seriously, wear a mask, stay 6 feet apart, that it has these ramifications about loving your neighbor
right.
in so many different ways, right? We already talked about the mask being a symbol of love your neighbor in that when we're wearing masks, we're protecting each other, but it also it lets people who are taking it seriously do more things. If everyone takes it seriously, we can all do more. We can all be out more. We can all see more people if we all take it seriously.
Right. So actually, I have a question for you, Grant.
Yeah.
So let's say you were someone who was struggling in mental health capacity right now, and to be honest with you guys, that's me. This quarantine has been tough.
Yeah.
I am someone that loves being around people.
It's hard on the extroverts.
It is. It's very. My wife, she's an introvert. She's loving this. She's having the time of her life right now, being able to stay home, watch the Netflix up until December 31st. But this has been really tough on me. It's really, really hard. But what would you recommend to those people? Do you have any solid ideas for things someone can do to nurture their own mental health right now?
Be more introverted?
Be more introverted, yeah. We're working on that one.
Just kidding. Well, you have to find things that you love that don't involve other people. Mm-hmm. That's first and foremost, right?
Or that you can do with other people safely.
Right, or that you can do with other people safely. So, if that's I mean, I know for a lot of our youth kids, that's video games. That's already safe, you know.
I'm with you guys.
But you
Stay
know,
safe. Play more video games.
right? So maybe, and this is just me coming up. You're talking to a super introvert here, so I haven't had to change my routine at all. Just kidding. I've had to change it some, but you know, maybe playing more video games that involve peer-to-peer communication,
Sure.
right? Multiplayer games.
Mm-hmm.
I'm so out of my depth, so I'm not gonna say.
I really only have to make Grant uncomfortable. No.
I'm not going to say any more about video games because if I do, I'm going to say something stupid. I probably already have.
Yeah.
But beyond, I'm sorry, just like, so that, and then finding other things that you can do that are safe that either involve other people in some way, whether that's, I mean, I know one of the things that I've done is I've had several Zoom calls with friends from college who I don't get to see. I mean, I don't get to see them in person often, even when there's not a pandemic, because we live in different cities. But this has just sort of been a catalyst to say, like, hey, let's get together on a Zoom call. And those wind up lasting hours, and we're laughing and having fun, just because, like, you're getting to talk to people that you love.
Right.
So I don't know. Find things that you enjoy doing that are COVID safe, and do more of them. That's
Yeah, I mean, and also too, like, if that's where you are, like, if you're like me, like, let someone know. Like that's huge. And honestly, you know, we talked something super serious earlier, where like Grant's friend hits a church where they seem to have a significant number of suicides. It doesn't have to be that extreme to know like you're having like a tough time. It can really just be like dang, this has me bummed out. I just want someone to talk to, or I just want to hang out with someone. I make a point to like make myself so available to like play video games with you guys. A, because y'all are awesome and it's super fun to like hang out with you guys. But B, because I want you guys to know that if you just need someone to hang out with, like, hit me up. If you want to talk what you're going through, awesome. If you don't, cool also. I don't want to say awesome, but just know, like, you're not alone in how you're feeling. If you are having a tough time right now, and like if you ever need someone to talk to about that, Grant and I are both here. Ty and Chrissy are all here.
Oh yeah. If you're watching this, like, just know you can always reach out to either Tony or I, or Ty or Chrissy. Like,
it's true. And just like hit us up. I'll play some video games with you. Like, if you want to watch Grant struggle with a video game, I'll make him learn something. It'll be fun to watch.
We should make that a prize for something. they should all have to learn something, and then they'll just be able to watch me just completely fail at a video game.
If you guys can memorize the books of the Bible, I'll give you guys a 10-minute clip of Grant playing whatever
video game you guys want to see me completely fail at.
Yeah. But
you all have to learn the books of the Bible in order. Like, we need a certain number of you to learn it.
Man, oh man. But anyways. I know that this has been really tough on people. I know I get really discouraged sometimes when I like turn on the news too much and like I see how many people aren't following the guidelines. But I want you guys to know is that we are taking them super seriously here because we want this to end. Like, nobody wants to be back in here in the youth room, like doing youth group the way we used to do it more than me. I promise you. And so, like, if you think we're being like too strict or we're being too severe by calling off youth group, let us know. Let's have that conversation. But just know, like, it's all done in a spirit of like, let's get this over with. Like, let's get this done.
No. And it's done through the lens, as we talked about, of Jesus' commands to love God and love others.
Yeah, I mean, actually, while we're speaking of Jesus' commands, can you think of any, you as a seminary graduate, can you think of any, like, really solid, like, examples of this in the Bible? I mean, there have been plagues and pandemics aplenty.
That's true.
Are we fashioning gold rats and tumors yet, or is that next week?
No, and thankfully we're not going to have to, look upon a snake held up on a cross.
Gotcha.
We're not there yet.
Okay.
Bible
jokes.
Yeah. Read your Bible, you'll understand the jokes. I see you have a passage down here on our outline. I don't know if you wanted to read that, because I can't think of anything else that's like directly appropriate to this moment.
Sure. I mean, and honestly, I like put a few things down for on my own notes. I don't know if these are super applicable, but like you do see in the book of Leviticus, which is among other things just a huge book of like laws and rules and ways to help keep society safe. But there's this passage, and let's see, I forgot to put the chapter number. Do I still have it? Nope.
Well, it's in Leviticus somewhere.
It's in Leviticus somewhere. I'm going to hazard a guess and say chapter 13, verses 45 and 46. And this is from the Message, so it doesn't sound like the Bible, I promise you it is. But it goes a little bit like this. Any person with a serious skin disease must wear torn clothes, leave his hair loose and unbrushed, cover his upper lip, and cry out, "Unclean, unclean!" As long as anyone has the sores, that one continues to be as long as one has the sores, that one continues to be ritually unclean. That person must live alone. He or she must live outside the camp. I don't know about y'all, but living with torn clothes, loose unbrushed hair, and a covered upper lip sounds like a pretty good description of my life right now. Unfortunately, we don't have to walk outside and yell, "COVID, I have COVID!"
Yeah.
But I do think this sets up a precedence that we are supposed to value the safety of other people.
Yeah.
That even though we're not bound by the Levitical laws anymore, I don't think God wants people walking outside yelling, "COVID, COVID!"
No, yeah. Again, this is maybe for a whole other podcast, but
Sure.
super briefly, one of the joys, and yes, I'll say that, joys of a book like Leviticus, even now, is that no, these aren't laws that we have to follow anymore, but they still tell us God's idea of a good communal life, right? I mean, so many of the laws in Leviticus and Exodus and elsewhere are about the community life of Israel, right? And so even though we don't have to follow these laws, they still show us, hey, these are this is God's version of the ideal community. This is God's version of how we ought to live our lives. Mm-hmm. And so a passage like you just read is a reminder that, yeah, God's version of a good community, of being a good part of a community, is letting other people know when they shouldn't be around you.
Right? It's really just being mindful of other people's safety when you're sick.
Right. If you're sick, be mindful of other people. Don't go get a bunch of other people infected. Mm-hmm. And with COVID, again, probably the scariest thing about COVID is that so many people can have it and not know. Right. There can be a carrier and not show symptoms. Mm-hmm. So I think the best way to apply something like this Leviticus passage is obviously if you do get sick, stay in your room, stay home, Right. But if you're out and about anywhere, wearing a mask, things like that, just being aware of the health of other people.
Cover the upper lip, as it says.
Yeah, cover the upper lip. Cover the upper lip with some fabric.
Yep.
Also the lower lip and the nose.
Yep. Yep.
But yeah.
And ultimately, too, guys, what I think me and Grant want to end on and be absolutely clear about is during a pandemic, what is the Christian response to it? It's to love your neighbor. That's the Christian response to everything. Love God and love your neighbor. It doesn't mean, right, we don't want to lose the love of God part. We don't want to just forget about the church. We don't want to forget about people. We don't want to just totally abandon our Christian ideals. But loving your neighbor right now means watching church from home, or doing it socially distant, or with a mask on, or whatever you have to do to keep everyone safe and get this over with. Because I said earlier, guys, COVID sucks. I'm done with COVID. I'm sick of this. This is not my 1 week vacation back in March that I thought it was going to be. And so that is why we are making the decision to keep youth group online just a little bit longer. We're almost through. Vaccines are currently being administered to frontline healthcare workers right now. I have a friend of mine who works in a hospital. He texted me bragging that he got vaccinated. But I want to pray us out and pray for you guys. But I just want to make sure that we're all clear on the fact that the Christian response to this pandemic is keeping each other safe. Helping end this as quickly as possible, but also checking in with people who might be feeling a little isolated or alone. Doing what we can to still love and care for those people, but just in a safe manner. Anyways, I'm going to go ahead and pray for us. Heavenly Father, Lord God, thank you so much, God, for the fact that we can do this, that we can broadcast teachings and youth group online in a way that's completely and totally safe, God. What an advantage what an advantage and a blessing that you have provided us this time around, Lord. Pandemics are not a new thing. They have been happening for as long as we've been here, I am sure, God. But we are fortunate to have the tools and resources now to be able to do this comfortably from home, God, comfortably with masks on, Lord, that we have science that tells us how long we can be contagious for, what the symptoms are, what to look out for, God, and that we have a vaccine that's currently being administered in our country, Father. Lord, I pray for each and every person who is suffering from COVID, Lord, whether that's suffering from isolation or anxiety or sickness or loss of a friend or family member. God, I pray for them, and I pray that you provide them spirits of joy, peace, comfort, rest. Lord, I pray that you provide them hope. Lord, I pray that you remind them that you have already won, God, that you are still in control, that you've always been in control, Lord. Lord, I pray for each and every student who's listening, God, that they found this time valuable, that they were able to glean something from Grant and I's conversation. They can start to understand the heart and motivation behind the reason that we are remaining online, Father. I pray that each and every student here would draw closer to you, God, and would remain safe during this pandemic. Lord, I say all of these things in your Son's name. Amen.
Amen.
All right. Thank you, everyone.